Again, welcome. My name is Greg Thrush. I'm a volunteer for CEA, and I'm going to moderate this evening. Welcome back for those of you who've been to prior public meetings by CEA on the Idaho-Maryland Mine. For those of you who are new, welcome. This meeting is being hosted by Community Environmental Advocates Foundation. CEA is a local community group that advocates for responsible land use and environmental protection policies and actions in Nevada County. And one of the projects that CEA works on is the proposed reopening of the Idaho-Maryland Mine. And that's the reason why everyone is here tonight. So thanks again for being here. So today's presentation is entitled Energy ROI, Return on Investment. We can do better. And this is the next in an education series about the implications of reopening the Idaho-Maryland Mine. We've been doing these since December of 2020. And all of these presentations have been recorded. And you can watch these presentations anytime by visiting MineWatchNC.org. It's the website for opposition to this mine. And if you go onto the website, just click on the videos, go to the library and click on the videos tab, and you will see a listing of all the videos of the presentations that we've done up to now. If you find this presentation and all the other presentations valuable, please let your friends know about them and send them a link. And that way they can join in on this conversation, even if they're not here tonight. CEA, as I said, we hold these meetings once a month. Usually the third Thursday of the month. And each month we present special speakers. Today's special guest speaker is Martin Webb, a longtime host of KVMR's Energy Report. Now I think it's called the Climate Report, and a local solar energy expert. So tonight, as always, we hope this meeting does three things for everybody. Provide some in-depth information that relates to the Idaho-Maryland Mine, allow people to ask questions of the panelists and CEA members, and hopefully participate in a discussion about the issues that are important to all of us. And thirdly, to learn about and how to take action to influence decision makers to oppose the mine reopening. So we have some other panelists. Martin is here with us. I believe his camera is not working tonight, so he will be heard, but maybe not seen. But we also have some other distinguished panelists tonight, and I want to just quickly introduce them. We have Josie Crawford, who is the executive director of the Wolf Creek Community Alliance. She lives along Wolf Creek, and her training is in biology and botany. Don Ravinas is a CEA board member and a member of the Nevada County Citizen Actions Now. Paul Schwartz is here. He is a retired capital planner. He's a CEA volunteer and a longtime Nevada County resident. Stephanie Wells is on. She's running our presentation tonight. Stephanie does this for a living, and she generously volunteers her time for CEA for us to do this. Thanks, Stephanie. You're great. Ralph Sieberstein is also here. He's the president of CEA Foundation, as is Tracy Sheehan. She is working with CEA to do outreach on the Idaho-Maryland Mine reopening. And myself, I'm Greg Thrush. I'm a community organizer for the Sierra Fund. And I live in downtown Grass Valley. I'm a volunteer for CEA. I just want to mention the Sierra Fund works on issues related to mining's legacy in the Sierra Nevada, which includes remediating the contamination from historic mining operations in this area. So we have a very big interest in the Idaho-Maryland Mine, both in our outside work and with regards to the reopening of it. If you're interested in what the Sierra Fund does, I recommend you check out our website. It's sierrafund.org, and there's lots of information about what we do. Okay, so so this evening we have two presenters. We have Ralph Sieberstein, who's going to talk for about 10 minutes about a cleanup of the Centennial site, which is related to the Idaho-Maryland Mine, but is a separate project. And so Ralph is going to present on that for a few minutes. Then Martin is going to do the main presentation tonight about this idea of energy return on investment and mining versus other businesses in the area. Then we're going to open it up for questions. And this is where we will have a discussion. And it's going to be based on the questions that all of you out there give to us. And so questions for the presenters and panelists are going to be submitted using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. See if you see the icon that looks like a Q&A. It says Q&A. Does everyone see that icon at the bottom of the screen? If you click on this icon and open up, you'll be able to type in questions. Please use this area for asking questions. We're not going to have audio presenters tonight. We're just going to use the Q&A screen. So it's fine to ask questions anytime you like while the presentation is happening or after it ends. We will just accumulate the questions, and once the presentations are done, we'll go through all the questions and ask them to the panelists. Okay, so so first I'd like to introduce Ralph Sieberstein. Oh, and then after the Q&A session, we'll have just a close up. Tracy will talk to us a little bit about how we can, what we can do to oppose the mine. So first I'd like to introduce Ralph Sieberstein. Ralph, as I said, is the president of CEA. He's a longtime resident of Nevada County and has been active in the community in land use and planning for many years. As I mentioned briefly, Ralph is going to give us an update on the current status of the remediation action plan process that is currently happening for the Centennial site. All right, Ralph. All yours.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Ralph Silberstein, and welcome everyone. Next slide, please. So some of you may not be familiar with this project. It's actually a separate piece of property over on Centennial Drive and Idaho-Maryland Road. It's 56 acres. And it's the site of the former Idaho-Maryland Mine tailings ponds until 1956. And so it has been on the top of the list of contaminated sites in the California EPA listings. And there was a Superfund designation that was conditionally deferred if the site was cleaned up. So a voluntary agreement was created between Rise Gold and the DTSC. The DTSC is the lead agency. That's the Department of Toxic Substances Control. It's a state agency. And so they're overseeing the cleanup. They've had assessments done. The PEA, it's a preliminary endangerment assessment, and that was completed. They go around, they test the site all over the place. They figure out what the contaminants are, and they use that to figure out how to clean up the site. So then after that, a period of time passed, and they created a cleanup plan. That's called a remedial action plan, and RAP. And I'm giving you these acronyms because they're peppered all over any documents you might read is helpful. Anyway, that plan and a CEQA document that goes with it, which is a mitigated negative declaration, are available for public comment. So what are our goals as an organization? Well, we fully support the cleanup, naturally. We really want it done right, and we want it cleaned up. Next slide, please. So if you look at the site, the recovery is already in progress on the site after 75 years of mining. It's covered with wetlands and woodlands. Over the last 75 years, native grasses and wildflowers have moved in and populating the wetlands. There's healthy stands of willows, cottonwoods, oaks, pine, and madrone. The drier areas have McNabb cypress, manzanita, hollyleaf redberry, and even pine hill flannelbush, which is an endangered species. So this is really valuable habitat. It doesn't really come across as being a wasteland or a mine tailing site right now, because nature has managed to heal it over time. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of the site, which shows the main details for the cleanup project. And if you look at the top, you'll see Idaho-Maryland Road going across the top, and then you'll see towards the middle coming down at a right angle is Centennial Drive. Yeah, if you can move your cursor, that helps a little bit. Thank you. Now, on the right, there's a dark area. That's on the east end of the site, and that's the area where they're going to move the contaminated soils that they've identified, and then they're going to encapsulate them by covering them with top impermeable layer and then topsoil on top of that. The yellow areas, it doesn't really appear very yellow in this picture, but on the upper part of the site, close to Centennial, close to Idaho-Maryland Road, there's a light yellow area, and all those yellow areas are areas where they're going to be removing the contaminants and moving them over to this darker tan area. Then you can also see a lot of blue. Those are wetlands on the site. They're pretty extensive, covering over 4 acres. And then there's a perimeter. I mean, you have the property, which is the outer dotted line. That's the 56 acres. But there's kind of a purplish dotted line that indicates the perimeter of the tailings. And that's the entire area that's covered with tailings from historical mining. It's somewhere on the order of 37 acres. So next slide, please. After the contaminated materials are moved from the yellow areas to the east area for encapsulation, then they need to be covered with soil. There's also some stabilization that will take place on some of the more toxic elements. And then there's also some impermeable layers, kind of an engineered fill on top. And then they put the soil on top of that. And that's basically to keep the materials underneath inert so they won't ever leach out into the water system or cause anybody harm. That's the goal. But what you'll see is these green areas, in order to cover the areas that they've worked on with soil again, they're removing soil from these green areas, which are called borrow areas. I like to use the term take areas because they're not going to put it back. They're removing the soil. And in order to do that, basically, they have to scalp off all the surface habitat, all the living plants, trees, everything, and then the top duff, and get down to where there's dirt, and then move the dirt over to cover these other areas. Well, the thing is, those areas that are green and the areas that are in between aren't really very contaminated. In fact, they're suitable for unrestricted use, which means you could put residential houses on there, or you could put businesses, or you could put industrial. But the plan by the DTSC calls for the entire site to be listed as industrial and cleaned up to industrial standards. So why is that? I mean, and why would they destroy all this habitat? It's kind of a troublesome thought when they could actually bring in soil from elsewhere to cover their remediation. So next slide, please. The reason is that the mine has plans to use this entire site for dumping of tailings. Could I have the next slide? There we go. So on the picture on the left, you can see the 56-acre site, and you can see it's almost entirely going to be covered by mine waste and tailings from the mine. Could you go back to the image of the mine waste? Yeah, thank you. So almost the entire area is going to be covered up to depths of about 70 feet, and basically graded on top to a big flat surface. So that area is going to cover about 44 acres. So basically we're going to have 44 acres of what was now habitat, eventually entombed underneath what they call engineered fill. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, please. So looking back at this picture, yeah, great, thanks. We feel that most of the green area, especially on the left or the west side, can be protected from destruction, and especially the areas that aren't colored. The hot spots, yellow areas within the green, can be cleaned up without destroying everything else. And so we're going to try to submit comments and get this changed. We really don't think it's appropriate. So looking back at what the goals of the mine are and why they chose to do the project this way. I would just like to quote from a statement in the RAP, the Remedial Action Plan. The remaining shallow tailings do not require consolidation, but are to be reworked in place as engineered fill and covered with clean engineered fill to prepare the site for future commercial industrial site development. So what they're saying is, beyond just the areas that are in green there, the entire area that has tailings on it is going to be basically torn up and then remixed in to form engineered fill. This really seems totally unnecessary. So next slide, please. So we're concerned about this, and we're submitting comments and closely scrutinizing the regulations regarding CEQA and whether or not they can just basically ignore the environmental impacts the way they're doing it. To learn more about this or to comment to the DTSC, you can visit our website at this address. If you just get to the MineWatch website, you can pretty easily find it if you just scroll to the library section. And comments may be submitted until September 23rd. So we urge people to become informed on this project and engage in it. And it's important to get the cleanup done, but we feel that it shouldn't be shortcutted and basically cause a lot of unneeded destruction. There's one more point, and that is, well, if the mine's approved, it's going to be destroyed anyway. And that's a possibility. It's also possible that the mine won't be approved. And even if the mine is approved, we feel that the impacts that are caused by the mine should be attributed to the mine and not be buried in a cleanup project under the DTSC. Thank you very much. So next slide. Okay, so I get double duty here. I'm going to talk a little bit about mining and climate change. Excuse me for a sec while I figure out where I am. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I kind of want to talk about the elephant in the room here. Everyone is aware of the damage caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. But the damage we've seen from COVID is minor compared to what we are facing with climate change. Just look outside. Look at all the drought, the fires, the smoke. I've been reading about rainfall on Greenland's ice cap, the first time in recorded history. The Arctic ice is melting. There's a positive feedback loop where the melting ice, then the sea absorbs more heat, and so it melts even faster. We see insect populations plummeting. We see diseases rampaging in our forests due to drier, warmer weather. We see sea level rise. We see unprecedented flooding in Germany, unprecedented heat waves in Oregon. The changes that are happening now will affect us for centuries. We're in a crisis, and it's just now warming up. Next slide, please. So locally, what are the impacts? How does it affect us directly? It's no surprise. This is not some faraway problem. The warmer temperatures mean less snowpack, reduced natural water storage, and a slow runoff that we want to keep our rivers running into the summer is diminishing. The drought impacts everyone: farmers, residents, tourists, wildlife. We have this long and severe fire seasons. I don't know about you, but it's starting to drive me nuts, all this smoke. And there's power supply impacts. Next slide. And don't forget, with respect to air, the mine project also will pollute our air directly locally. We're looking at fugitive dust from rock crushing, loading, hauling, dumping, spreading, and compacting. The dust may contain asbestos and microscopic silica. These are harmful to and contribute to lung disease. There'll be diesel trucks running, and those contribute to greenhouse gases as well as local smog. And there's mine exhaust. including ammonium nitrate and blasting residue. Next slide. Okay, so opening a mine will significantly increase greenhouse gas emissions. We need to stop climate change. We need to do more, not less. We urgently need to cut back emissions. All new construction needs to be net zero. This mine will produce about 9,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas annually, and those numbers are liable to change as this project moves along. And added to that, the mine will produce even more local air pollution. We are in a crisis, and making the air pollution and greenhouse gas worst by opening the mine is just plain wrong. Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph.
Next slide.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
Oh, yeah. Well, this one little transition piece here. Greenwash. Well, go ahead, Greg.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you. I thought you were done, but go ahead.
Actually, I am done. People can read this. It just kind of seems appropriate.
Great, thanks, Ralph, for the update on the Centennial. A little explanation. They're connected, but they're separate projects. So it's a little hard to wrap our heads around this and how they interact and what happens first, and what happens if one thing happens but the other thing doesn't. I mean, and so thank you for kind of laying it out for us. And if anybody has questions about that, please put it into the Q&A. Linda and Ellie, I see that you've raised your hand. We're actually using a Q&A this evening to ask questions. So if you have something you want to say or ask, type it into the Q&A area and we will address it. Let's see. Okay, well, let's go on to our second presentation. Our feature presenter this evening is Martin Webb. For many, he needs no introduction. Martin is the host of the KVMR program Climate Report. He has been in renewable energy field for 20 years and with a strong focus on solar power. He's run his own solar company as well as worked for solar panel manufacturers. So he brings an insider's perspective to one growing segment of the energy world. He lives in Penn Valley and is the proud father of 2 children. And Martin, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're super excited to have you do a presentation. And I will hand it over to you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you having me. Is the audio okay? Can everyone hear me fine?
Yes, everything, I can hear you. I think.
Excellent. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm calling energy ROI. I was asked to look at the energy use associated with the proposed mine operations. I wasn't really given any specific direction of what to find, what to look for, just was given a couple of reports issued last year from a large engineering firm called Drought. They've been around 40 years. They're across 8 states, hundreds of employees, and they do technical reports for things like the mine. So I was given a Drought report from February and December of last year. I was given the Nevada County Energy Action Plan. And I also looked at the Rise Gold website and what they were saying and some of their footnotes. And what jumped out at me is something that I'm calling energy ROI. And ROI stands for return on investment. And normally it's a financial term. If I invest this much money in something, what's my return back on it? And in this case, I'm referring to the electricity used at the mine, the proposed mine. And what is the return we're getting on it? And right now, the main return that's being discussed as far as pro advocacy for the mine seems to be jobs and money, jobs and money, jobs and revenue, jobs, jobs, jobs and revenue. So I looked at how much electricity it's using and what's our return. And I discovered that it's using almost the same amount of electricity as all of Nevada County, the non-residential sector. So what I discovered is it's not providing many jobs, and it would give what I would call the worst energy return on investment. So the investment is local electricity and greenhouse gases. And the mine's annual electricity use is the same as all of Nevada County's non-residential together. And the return is local jobs and earnings. And when I ran the numbers as far as direct jobs, giving the county the same amount of electricity as the mine, we could produce 100 times as many jobs. And give the county's non-residential business sector the same energy to use, and we would produce 100 times the earnings. What I discovered is mining tends to actually be the lowest job provider compared to other types of businesses and industry. So let's look at the electricity use. That's what I focused on specifically. And what I discovered is that during the first year of construction, if it goes to construction, they would use 16.5 megawatt hours of electricity. But once it was up and running, if it ever gets to what they would consider full capacity, it would use almost 50,000 megawatt hours a year after it's been built. This is data from the Drought report in November of last year. Now, the county's non-residential use, so putting the gold to use between our ears here as local citizens, we use in the non-residential sector 50,000 megawatt hours a year, according to the Nevada County Energy Action Plan in 2017. So that's from the EAP. If you ever see the EAP while I'm talking, that's the county's Energy Action Plan. And that plan stipulates that we want to reduce our electricity use by half, roughly speaking. So when you compare it all together, you've got the electricity use is roughly similar between the two. And I just want to quickly show you where I'm getting my numbers. I'm not making these things up. This is from the Drought report. And at the top, it's talking about when it's in operation. Anticipated electricity consumption, they thought it would be under construction this year, 16,500 megawatt hours. Then in this report, they looked at 3 different periods that covers the next 80 years. They assumed the mine was going to be open for the next 80 years, and that every year would actually use the exact same amount of electricity. It would never change. That's where I got my 49,500 megawatt hours a year. And if you look right above that, the sentence says where they're using electricity. It's for facility operations, for example, electrically powered underground mine equipment, ore processing, water treatment, surface building operations. There's water pumping. A lot of this stuff will be going 24/7. So here's where I get my numbers, the Drought report, just shy of 50,000 megawatt hours a year. So here's then where I'm getting my county numbers from. This is a snapshot from the Nevada County Energy Action Plan. They looked at 2005, they looked at 2017, natural gas and electricity. We're just going to look at electricity, and we're just going to look at non-residential. So what I want you to see here, though, is that non-residential here in Nevada County was trending downward. When the county looked at it in 2005 and looked at it in 2017, we went from almost 60 million kilowatt hours a year to almost 50 million kilowatt hours a year. And the Energy Action Plan is going to push that down even further to where it'll be below that 50,000 kilowatt hours a year. And just know that the Energy Action Plan is in kilowatt hours. The mine report is in megawatt hours. And the difference is just a comma and 3 zeros. So here you're looking at 50 million kilowatt hours. That's the same as 50,000 megawatt hours. So again, you've got head to head almost the same. And we don't know when the mine will ever, if it ever opened up and got to what they considered full production, when they would hit that. And we don't know when the county would hit it. We might have already gotten ourselves to below 50,000 megawatt hours. But my contention is that, roughly speaking, all of our county businesses and the mine use the same megawatt hours of power. So head to head, who gives better ROI per precious megawatt hour of energy? Because we don't have energy to waste. We can't be adding more pollution and global greenhouse gases. So when it comes to this mine, it looks like they'd be using the same as all of our citizens and putting our business savviness to work. So let's look at that. If that's the investment, 50,000 megawatt hours a year, who gives more jobs? Because the return apparently is jobs, jobs, jobs. And this is where things got interesting in my analysis. So the direct jobs at the mine, they say it would be about 300 people, about 312 people if it ever hits what they consider to be full production. They think it would be about 200 people locally. and then another 100 that would have to be sourced non-locally. Well, the county, non-residential jobs, according to the EAP, this is just county info, none of this is secretive. BAU stands for business as usual. The county, given the same 50,000 megawatt hours a year to use, we're able to produce 32,000 jobs. So their info comes from their press releases and the DUDEC report. My info for the county comes from the Energy Action Plan. But here's what's important about this full production number. Is from the press release from Rise Gold just a few months ago, they've made it clear that, quote, no technical report has ever been filed to even support that this possible rate of maximum production could ever even be achieved. The company has not completed a feasibility study. They haven't even demonstrated the economic viability of the Idaho-Maryland mine. So keep in mind this notion of these numbers of jobs, they haven't even done an analysis apparently to even see if that's realistic. And that would be the maximum top end, and there's no telling how long it would take to get there. So just keep that in mind. This 300 jobs isn't something that starts the next day that the mine is in business. So they also made a note, and recently in a company report for Rise Gold, that only about 2/3 of their expected jobs may actually go to locals. So for the same amount of power use, measured head to head job wise, our county and its citizens and the ingenuity using the gold between their ears provides more than 100 times the number of jobs. But then they also talk about something else, jobs point two. That's indirect jobs. That means that, man, we're going to create so much money for all of these workers, they're going to spend it, and that's going to make more jobs. And they claim that that's going to be around 1,200 indirect jobs if the mine ever hits the magic full production that they've never proven they could hit. They say that 300 mining jobs turns into 1,200 indirect jobs due to the United States mining industry has a multiplier of 4 times. So however many jobs the mine makes, 4 times that will be created in the community. Sounds awesome, doesn't it? They also suggest in the press release that the majority will be from Nevada County. That is something that they've not cited to any scientific fact. But here's where I want to talk to you. This is where I dig deeper into the numbers. The company estimates, this is in the Rise Gold press release, the company estimates that when they hit their magic full production, which is 1,000 tons per day, TPD is 1,000 tons per day, every single day, 1,000 tons of mining at the Idaho-Maryland would require around 300 direct employees. But keep in mind, the mining industry has a magic wand, so that an indirect multiplier of 4 additional jobs are created from every direct job. Using this, total employment created balloons to 1,500 people, the majority of which would be in Nevada County. Well, let's check out that number 10 footnote in the economic policy brief, because it's really just 2 tables. There's just 2 tables here, and I'm going to show them to you. And it's going to show you mining, it would be a bad deal for our community. Because when you look at the Economic Policy Institute data that they rely on, compared to mining, many other business sectors would actually provide an even better multiplier. And mining is the only sector that really provides most of its jobs upstream, which means the suppliers to the mine out of town, not downstream, the local employees spending money. So let me show you this for a second. Get your thinking caps on, grab a protein shake. I'm going to explain what you're looking at here. Don't worry, we're not going to get too deep in the weeds, but it's important to see this. So this is what the mine is touting as where they get their magic multiplier of 4. Along the left-hand side, you'll see just a column of all the different industries in America, from agriculture, forest, fishing, mining, utilities, construction, all the way down to real estate, educational service, arts, entertainment, and recreation. What they looked at was if you gave any industry 100 jobs, any industry, how many extra jobs would it create? And there's the supplier jobs, which are upstream. The mine opens up, all of a sudden there's a bunch of people that need to provide them with supplies, tends to be out of town. Then there's downstream, which is the induced jobs. That's all the extra jobs that the people in the first 2 columns spend their money at. So that altogether, mining apparently creates, with those 100 direct jobs, 390. That's where they get their 3.9 multiplier, times 4x. For every 100 jobs in mining, you get 400. Well, that sounds amazing until you start looking at all these other industries. Get out your pen and write down these industries and their multipliers. Utilities, almost 10x. Durable manufacturing, almost 8x. Non-durable manufacturing, 5. Information is an industry, almost 6x. Real estate and rental leasing. It is such a tight housing market for either buyers or renters. Look at that, 9x. Professional, scientific, and technical services, management of companies, even arts, entertainment, and recreation is virtually identical to that 4x. So when you look at 20 different industries, mining doesn't stand out. It's actually smack dab in the middle at about 50% is good. So there's 8 or 9 other industries. Any of them would provide way better numbers as far as jobs. But here's the other thing that's fascinating. So you've got your upstream supplier jobs. You got your downstream, what they call induced jobs. And here, I'll show you what those asterisks mean. Down here, it says the single asterisk for supplier jobs. That means people that not just supply materials, but money. So all the investors and financial lenders and banks, all of those are the supplier jobs. And if you drill down into some of the info Rise Gold provides, they show that during operations, 85% of their vendor purchases will be non-local and out of town. So those supplier jobs will mostly not be local. And the induced jobs come from them also won't be local, because if you look at the double asterisk, the definition of induced jobs, or that includes jobs supported by re-spending of income from employees in the first 2 columns. Direct jobs here at the mine and supplier jobs, which are mostly out of town. So most of those induced jobs won't be local. Most of the supplier jobs won't be local. But what's also fascinating is I want to draw your attention to the ratio between these 2 numbers. Start from the bottom. And I want you to notice how this is 140 to 70, 108 to 54, around 250 to 125. You can just loosely see that generally speaking, any industry in America will produce twice as many jobs downstream as it does upstream. That means local. Until you get up here to mining, it is the pits, it is the worst. Most of its jobs are actually upstream, not much downstream, because it just doesn't take that many people to do the same amount of work. So almost everything else is going to pour on the jobs into the local economy. Mining is going to pour on the jobs outside of town. So many other industries provide equal or better jobs numbers, and generally industry creates 2 times more downstream jobs in our community than upstream jobs by a factor of 2, but mining is almost the exact opposite. It's going to be mostly upstream non-local jobs. So when you look at this Economic Policy Institute data versus mining, many other business sectors would provide much better multipliers of indirect jobs. And mining is the only one that provides the majority of its jobs actually not here. So then they provide this other table that's really fascinating that Rise Gold doesn't refer to at all, but it's the other table that they're linked to the Economic Policy Institute. And it shows the same type of information, but here's where I want you to think about this for a second. This is very damning to mining. This is showing something different. At the very top, it's going to show you this is per $1 million of actual products provided. If you gave each of these industries, not 100 employees, but you asked every single one of these industries to set out on a stage $1 million of what they produce, and then figure out how many jobs it takes to produce that, because not every industry needs the same amount of people to produce $1 million worth of their stuff. You could have 2 artists produce $1 million painting. That's $1 million worth of goods to 2 people. Or you could have somebody sell $1 million worth of candy bars, and it's going to take a whole lot of people. So per $1 million of finished product, how many direct jobs are created? And then upstream and downstream. And in the end, what's the total? And you can see that mining is pitifully, it's actually the worst in the single digits as far as the amount of jobs created per revenue, per wealth. So mining produces the fewest total jobs of any industry in the US per $1 million. You can just add the direct 1.3 to the indirect 5.9. They still are stuck in single digits, while any other industry is going to be in double digits. Any other industry is going to provide far more jobs. So using their own EPI data that the mine cites to tout their estimated 4 times indirect jobs. Literally any other industry would be better for total direct jobs, indirect jobs, or just local jobs. So when you do the same though for Nevada County, when you look at Nevada County's energy action plan, they have some jobs data there. So versus the Idaho-Maryland Mine's hope for a maximum of 312 direct, our county's own efforts and ingenuity of our people and resources takes the same 50,000 megawatt hours a year and creates over 30,000 jobs. This is a snapshot from the Energy Action Plan. These are the jobs associated with non-residential use, business as usual, BAU is business as usual, non-residential energy use, how it's expected to track along with employment growth over the years. So in Nevada County, the same 50,000 megawatt hours, same as all of Nevada County, is what the mine wants to use. We can produce 100x. They're only offering 300 jobs versus our over 30,000. So let's look at earnings, because that's the other big return that we're supposed to accept as a community. It's jobs and money, jobs and money. Well, when you look at the energy ROI, they're clearly going to deliver hardly anything for jobs. Let's look at earnings. It's the same. They're the lowest job provider, and they're also low on the earnings totem pole. So this is a similar type of table. You've got your 20 different industries that America has that we could accept and boost and push here in our community. Many of these we're already doing. Matter of fact, this is a snapshot of Nevada County, and you can see what percent of our economy all of these different parts and pieces play. And what's interesting is there's mining currently contributing about 3 million a year, but the total earnings, when we use that same 50,000 megawatt hours a year, what does our non-residential sector produce in earnings? 2.6 billion. So even if, and that's a big if on purpose, if they created 312 new jobs paying 94,000 a year, that would be almost 30 million a year in earnings. But our county, without mining included, produces 2.6 billion. So again, using the exact same megawatt hours a year as an energy investment, we as Nevada County citizens on our own can create 100 times the jobs and 100 times the possible earnings. The mine just has the worst energy return on investment. Same annual electricity use is what our brains are already using. The mine offers 1% of what our county can deliver in earnings and jobs. It provides a tiny fraction of local jobs and earnings for the same megawatt hours of use. We already do 100 times better per megawatt hour. It is a bad investment to double our use like what they're asking and get hardly anything in return. And literally almost any industry would be better. Pick one. So now I want to quickly go through though how the Idaho-Maryland Mine in their DUDEC reports is how they deal with the Nevada County Energy Action Plan, because they're very dismissive and it's very strange. The DUDEC report tries to sweep the entire Energy Action Plan under the doesn't really apply to us rule, creating these weird loopholes and silly logic. When in reality, the mine, as we know, would double the non-residential electricity use in Nevada County, while the Energy Action Plan and climate change demands a 51% reduction. So it clearly is not in alignment. We would have to trash our Energy Action Plan for our community that we've already agreed to. And by we, I mean the Board of Supervisors in 2019, in order to get a fraction of jobs. So let's review the DUDEC report on the EAP, because I want to show you how bizarre and weird it is. First of all, I want to point out that in the Nevada County's Energy Action Plan, they have very specific goals. They have 3 goals: energy efficiency, lower the use of energy in our county, increase renewable energy use and battery storage, and then reduce our water use. So it's reduce energy, reduce water, and more renewable energy. And in this Energy Action Plan, they also listed some strategies for the county on how they could push citizens and businesses to hit these goals. But the DUDEC report illogically frames the role of the mine against the county's internal strategies. They ask, is the mine adopting the county's strategies, as opposed to does the mine actually support the end goals? It's very weird. I'm going to show you what's called Table 18. Here's the DUDEC report, and this is where they say, hey, does this project, is it consistent with Nevada County's Energy Action Plan? And what you'll see on this page are a couple of goals. There's goal number 1, energy efficiency. Our goal is to improve energy efficiency in buildings and facilities to reduce energy use. We have another goal, expand more renewable energy, and resilience means storage. So these are the stated goals of the Energy Action Plan. The county created 3 internal strategies for each of these. For example, this is for the county to do to expand outreach and education, to improve compliance, to continue to increase the efficiency of county buildings. These are internal county strategies. DUDEC decided to, instead of asking, does this project comport with the goals? They bizarrely asked, hey, does this comport with the county strategies? And what they continue to do over and over is they say, Nevada County is supposed to implement this strategy, not applicable. Nevada County is supposed to implement this strategy, not applicable. Nevada County to implement, not. Look, folks, in this report, they should be asking, do they demonstrate consistency with the goals of the Energy Action Plan? And instead, if you do that, if you ignore the internal county strategies, and you instead actually look to see, does the project meet the goals, it will not help with efficiency or reduce energy use. It increases county energy use, counter to our goals. Although yes, by law, it will have to comply with Title 24 standards, which they tout. While they dismiss most of these, they try to make sure that they tout, hey, it would comply with energy efficiency standards. Oops. So it's something that it's like, well, yeah, of course, you're going to have to actually do things by law. So what we're going to actually look at is, what would it do? It wouldn't comply. And yes, they would do the one thing that they would have to by law. Renewable energy. Contrary to DUDEC, this goal is actually indeed meant for homes and businesses. And in the Energy Action Plan, they give examples of businesses that have gone solar and upcoming mandates. So when it comes to energy storage, they say it's not applicable to the project, and it certainly is. The mine completely fails to look at either using renewable energy or battery storage. So it does not demonstrate consistency with the second goal of our Energy Action Plan. And when it comes to water, this is where it's bizarre. This is where, you know, they make it clear this is the county strategy to improve and increase the county's outreach and education efforts. This is clearly something only the county is supposed to do, right? Improve and increase the county's outreach and education efforts. You'd think DUDEC would then do one of these. The county is supposed to implement, not applicable. Instead, they wanted to make sure that they figured out how to tout that they comply with the water efficiency codes. And they use this opportunity to acknowledge actually that, yeah, we do recognize that these are county actions, but we still want to tout ourselves here. Let's just acknowledge that, no, they're not going to help with reducing water use. They use an incredible amount of water, and it's counter to using water in smart ways. And yes, because they'd be forced to by law, they would comply with Title 24 water standards just because they have to, not because it's some sort of special benevolency. But the wacky thing is, at the end of this ridiculous table where they ignore the actual goals of our county, the stated goals of our county's Energy Action Plan, and they just look at the internal strategies and say, hey, we don't have to do any of those strategies, therefore we're consistent. They say, based on the analysis in Table 18, this project would be consistent with the applicable strategies. Notice they don't say goals. If these guys were real professionals adhering to accuracy, they would say, this project is inconsistent with the applicable goals. They can't say that, so they appear to have twisted the words to say, you know what, there's no way that we can say this is good for the goals. Let's instead try and hoodwink everyone and just put in the county's internal strategies and say, yeah, we don't have to do any of that, so we're good with the EAP. It's just craziness. So the DUDEC report illogically frames the role of the mine against the county's internal strategies to hit goals and dismisses all of those because they're not the county, as opposed to actually performing a logical analysis of, does this darn mine even support the clear end goals of the county EAP? So Table 18 is useless. It's not an analysis. The mine doesn't even appear to attempt to try to honor our county EAP. They noted in the DUDEC report, it doesn't have a force of law here. They seem to really intend to only do as little as California law requires them to do. And they apparently hope that by providing misleading info and reports and cherry picking jobs data and biased press releases won't be noticed. But it is being noticed that anything else we can and will do 100 times better, given the same amount of energy use, while not trashing our local energy action plan or our environment. So that's what I've got. I hope that wasn't too much too fast, but I appreciate people listening. Now, again, what I was really looking at is just, hey, given the same amount of megawatt hours of electricity, mining the gold between our ears as citizens, knowing what we need and what we can do, we've provided 100 times the amount of jobs with that same energy investment and 100 times the earnings. And there's no reason why we should blow out of the water and destroy our energy action plan to help the environment and stop climate change just for a paltry fraction amount of jobs and earnings, when literally almost every other industry possible would provide more direct jobs, more downstream jobs, and do a heck of a lot better for us and our citizens. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to look at energy use in the mine. That's my energy ROI talk. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Martin. That was fascinating. So our presenters have presented, and now it's our opportunity for all of us to everybody to ask questions, and to the panelists, and to start a discussion about what we heard tonight. And to remind everyone, if you want to ask questions, go to the Q&A icon, click on it in the lower part of your screen, and type in a question. And we have, we're looking at them, and we will, I will sort of see them and ask them. So here we go. One early on, while Ralph was making his presentation, somebody asked, so what happened in this fire that happened yesterday with regards to the Centennial site? And somebody else asked, well, so Ralph, can you tell us a little bit about what happened? What did happen? Did anything happen?
Yeah, hi. You know, I was kind of curious, so I drove over there today and looked at it. Yes, something happened. The site was damaged by the fire. From what I could see, and it's pretty hard to make an assessment because I can only look at the edges, but it looks like there was a pretty hot fire that burned over on what would be the east side of the project, over by where there's where they anticipate putting the encapsulated materials. But it also seemed to have burned quite a bit along the south side of the property. It came over the ridge and it burned down into there. And so that probably caused quite a bit of foliage destruction in that sloped area. Unfortunately, that's where the pine hill flanabush, which is a endangered species, is. Otherwise, the western part of the property and the northern part of the property seem to be fairly unfazed, as far as I can tell. But you know, it's kind of hard to tell. There's a lot of smoke, and I can't really go on the site. So that's what it seemed like to me. But I would like to comment on what that means. Realize that these native species are really fire adapted, and so you know the pines, even though they might look singed, they come back. The oak trees are remarkable. They'll usually hardly be phased by a fire. They tend to just leaf out the next year, and even if that doesn't happen, they'll re-shoot off the base and form a series of new growth that way. And that's true for a lot of these plants. And a lot of them actually thrive when the fire goes through and the seeds are basically waiting for this event to happen. They're designed to actually re-sprout their seeds after a fire. So even though it looks pretty bad in parts of it, I think a lot of it really would come back next year. That's as far as I could estimate, but I don't really have the full details.
And Thomas asks, how will yesterday's fire impact the DTSC process, if at all?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you know, in terms of what's happened to the soils, you know, a lot of ash has dropped on the soil. There's some heavy equipment that went in there. I just want to say one thing though, is, you know, we are so lucky. We have an incredible firefighting force here. The way they responded to that, I live in the flight path of the airport, and it was like this amazing orchestrated attack. And this fire could have easily just moved right up and into town. And that just really, I think we should all be really appreciative of the outstanding job these guys do. Yeah, as to where that changes the process, I don't know. There might have to be some evaluation of the habitat a little bit. I just don't know the answer to that. Maybe somebody else does.
Yeah. So thank you, Rob, for answering those. Yeah, I'm just sort of now thinking about Martin's presentation. You know, this whole return on investment in terms of energy is a really interesting way to look at, you know, how we think about what businesses and industries are good for our community. And I think that this idea, you know, I knew that the mine just used a lot of energy, but I don't really understand why. Does anybody have, like, what exactly, and Martin touched on a little bit, but like, can someone give me a clear idea of like, what exactly is all this electricity being used for? What are they doing to use 50 megawatts hours of power a year? Anybody?
Don and I chatted a little bit about that. This is Martin, and he might, if he's able to get on, he might have some good answers about that. And one of the interesting things he noticed actually was that compared to the February DUDEC report to the December DUDEC report, what's interesting is initially in February, they showed 42,000 megawatt hours a year, which is obviously still pretty substantial. And when they redid the report, it was almost 50,000 megawatt hours a year. And what Don discovered was that some of the equipment that would be running off of diesel and creating fumes, whether it's vehicles or just stationary equipment with motors, some of those are going to be traded out for electric vehicles or electric motors, so that it would reduce the greenhouse gases associated with the project and would instead trade it for more electricity use. So it'd be getting rid of fossil fuels, but adding more to their electricity, which jacked it up even further. So they're attempting to, you know, try and mask as many of the greenhouse gases as possible by switching to electric, and that's boosting it even further. But Don, if you're on, you know, you had some great input too about the type of processes that are being utilized. So much is being automated here about that.
They have about 61 different kinds of equipment they'll be running below surface and above surface. Loaders and locomotives and all kinds of different equipment that they're using for the electricity. You're going to have 100 lights that are going to be on constantly 24 hours a day. There's going to be 10 vehicles running about 12 hours a day. So all this adds up to the total amount of electricity usage. And it's actually being measured mainly on what the PG&E usage is for all this equipment.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in here if I could. One way to think about the energy is, you know, they're going to be going down 3,000 feet and going to be pumping water out from that depth. So there's a tremendous amount of energy to continuously 24/7 for 80 years pumping water up 3,000 feet. And then they're going to go down 3,000, 2,000, 3,000 feet, or at least 1,000 feet, it looks like, for most of their excavation, tunneling. Then they're going to extract, you know, basically ore by the ton. So you got to lift all that ore to the surface. They have to grind it all up just to get an ounce or less of gold out of it. And then they have to haul it off somewhere to get rid of it or put it back under the tunnel. So there's a huge amount of energy in moving this and processing this rock from great depths just to get these little amounts of yellow rock that we need for jewelry, I guess. I mean, it doesn't really make sense in terms of the environmental costs, in my view. We have better uses for our energy.
And I might add that we've only been talking about electricity usage. There's a lot of energy going to be with vehicles transferring rock back and forth between Centennial and Brunswick, the cement trucks coming in and out all day long. So that's going to be a lot of energy use too, but it's not what we've been talking about tonight is mainly electricity use as opposed to the other energy uses.
So go ahead. Sorry. Anybody else want to comment?
No.
So,
I'm done.
okay. Several people just made this comment. Nancy, Caroline, Eli, Serafina, just saying thank you. It was a good presentation. Can we send this ROI analysis to the County Board of Supervisors? You know, is this something that would be useful for them to understand? How do we do that?
I'd be happy to just the you know, on my own behalf as a citizen. But yeah, sometimes these things are best delivered by groups. So maybe it's something that I could work with the group on, so that it's something that, you know, is presentable under your logo and name. Otherwise, yeah, I was actually surprised and excited about finding this info and feel like it needs to be shared. So I totally support, you know, getting this info out, because here's the thing is, you know, I've said this before when I first was talking to this group about presenting, is we've got a bunch of pro mine advocacy people in the community, and they're mainly latching on to jobs and earnings, jobs and money. And just like with dogs and puppies and kids, if you're going to take something away from them, you have to substitute something back. And so it's not good enough just to say, hey, we want to stop this mine, because they're seeing it as all or nothing. And what I want to present is, oh my gosh, there's so many other choices that would be way better. Let's think of what else we could do for our citizens, because who knows best what we need in our opportunities for the future with the changing climate and the changing economy than our own citizens. And so I feel like it's really vital to get this info out, to say, yeah, that is pretty neat that you think you could do a 4x multiplier, but wow, there's so many other things that would do even better. Thanks for the offer. No, thank you. We can put more citizens to work. And yeah, I support whatever needs to happen to get this in front of decision makers' eyes, because it was very enlightening for me.
We would, CEA, I'm sure, would be very happy to post that article and refer people to it and encourage them to use it to educate the public.
Yeah, we don't just have one choices. It's almost any other industry other than mining. And if you think about it, you can see why. It just doesn't need a lot of people to produce such enormous value. A lot of it's automated. It's a few amount of jobs to pull this really valuable rock out of the ground. That's super cool. You can do that. Yay, pat on the back. We can actually do way better in Nevada County. So no thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to add, go ahead, Don.
I was just gonna say, I might add that Martin also noticed that they counted PG&E bills that be paid for by the mine is counting as revenue, and yet it goes to San Francisco. So it isn't local revenue that we're getting here, and yet they count it as local revenue here.
Yeah, it was bizarre. I discovered that yesterday, that in their, they tried to claim that 41% of vendor purchases, if the mine was open, would be local. But I noticed that what they considered local was the utility. They claimed we have a local utility company. And so $8 million a year of PG&E bills is actually going into our local economy. And then they added a few multipliers on it and said how much extra millions of dollars it would make. It was pretty ridiculous. So yeah, there's a sort of a comedy of hidden errors. If you look deep enough, the jobs aren't there, the revenue isn't there, and they've really fudged the numbers when it comes to energy, electricity, and our county's action plan. So, you know, they've almost made it too easy for a group like this to grab hold of some of this information and wave it and holler it from the towers.
Yeah, I would like to add 2 quick points. The analysis, of course, doesn't even begin to look at the jobs that would be lost if the mine goes in. In the previous studies, it was determined in 2008, an independent economic analysis was done on the mine, and they determined that actually, if the area was allowed to develop without the mine, it would produce more jobs. And it also came to light that some high-tech companies, especially in Whispering Pines, would probably close up shop and move because they didn't want to be on top of a mine due to vibrations. And also it could have a negative effect on real estate values. It could have a negative effect on, other jobs and tourism. So there's a lot of issues at stake. Thanks.
And I want to mention too, when it comes to jobs, what's really important about those tables at the Economic Policy Institute link that is all over Rise is Gold's literature online. Wherever you find jobs, it links back to those tables. And the key thing about indirect job multipliers is because other industries have such stronger multipliers, that means they need to create half as many direct jobs to still create all of those indirect jobs in our community. So yeah, the mine might need 300 jobs at the mine to create 1,500 in the community, but real estate and renting homes, that had a 9x multiplier. So instead of needing 300 jobs, you only need 150 jobs in that industry in order to create far more rippled out in the community. So the indirect jobs multiplier is huge because that actually reduces the number of direct jobs that you feel like you need to create. We don't have to match 300 for 300. Well, if you're going to close the mine, where are you going to get 300 other jobs? We don't need to, because any other industry has amazing indirect multipliers and ripple effects in the community. And we're just using Rise Gold's own footnotes to prove it.
Good. There's a question. What does PG&E say about providing this amount of power, these power requirements? And for that matter, NID. I mean, have these entities weighed in on this proposal?
This is Martin. I don't know what they've said, if someone else can speak to that. What I do know is that both NID and PG&E, they only make money if they sell people electrons. NID sells them to PG&E, PG&E marks it up and sells it to us. So as long as they feel like they can provide them, they'd probably be tickled pink to have a customer that's buying twice as much of their products. That's just shooting from the hip. I don't know if someone else has a better answer.
Yeah, well, in the previous application by MGold, which ended up, they never completed the draft EIR. They had to redo it, but at that point they did get some sort of well-served letter from PG&E. But I have no idea at this point whether they've gotten another one this time around. You would think there might be some issues, given the fact that we have power outages all the time and all the other issues with PG&E, that to put this extra load on our grid seems, another threat to our public safety. So it would be something we need to track down.
Yeah, one other comment is, if I was PG&E and I'm looking at our community's fantastic EAP or Energy Action Plan, where we're telling them, you know what, we're going to do the same as we're doing now, but we need half of the electricity in 15 years, PG&E might actually see this as great, filling in the gaps. We're telling them we're not going to need the same amount of energy. So they're probably thinking, great, we already have the infrastructure there to deliver twice as much as what Nevada County is going to need. Thank goodness the mine is coming in to actually fulfill what we're saying we're going to stop buying from them. So yeah, the EAP almost makes it more attractive for PG&E to say, yeah, bring that mine in, because we're going to stop using that same amount of electricity. Devil's advocate.
Serafina, she was one of the people that said, how can we get this to the Board of Supervisors? And one of her questions follow-up was that, why isn't there an economic study by the county? And shouldn't there be? And, why is there not an economic study needed? Why isn't it required for this? Or I guess to reframe the question, is it required?
So we have pushed endlessly to get an economic study done this time. There was one done last time when the city was a lead agency. CEQA doesn't require one, but in order for the county to make a decision, I would expect they would need to be able to assess whether this time the project will be a loser for jobs like it was last time, according to the study. So I think we should continue to ask the county to please do an economic study.
There's a question here from Mark. He asked, will the common labor, a mucker, he calls them, be paid $90,000 a year as the Rise Gold claims?
Yeah, the lowest paid job that they're showing is about $65,000 a year. I would encourage people to go to the Rise Gold website, and at the top they have I think it says Jobs and Economy link. And if you click on that Jobs and Economy link, they've got their spiel and happy smiling faces. But at the bottom of the Jobs and Economy page is a big fat button that says, go here and look at our reports. And they disclose all of their information, every single job, every single salary. And they even disclose how they acknowledge that they don't think Nevada County could fulfill all 300 of those jobs. At most, we would be able to fulfill 200 and the rest would go elsewhere. But I would say go to the website, Rise Gold, whatever their website is, Jobs and Economy, scroll to the bottom, click the button, and prepare to have your brain expanded. They show exactly how much they would pay everybody from low to high. And the top 20 highest paying jobs, they feel like no one local would be qualified for it, and they would have to go out of town for all of them. And so, yeah, the lowest paying that I remember was about $65,000 a year.
Carolyn makes a comment. She says, I think that the ROI would speak a lot more to our officials than climate change issues. I'm not sure that's the case, that's her opinion. But so what it does speak to, like if we are not, if the county is not obliged to do an economic study for this proposed reopening of the mine, then I think it becomes incumbent upon us as community residents to really bring this issue to the supervisors and not let them and help them think about it. Basically, if they're not going to commission an economic study, then we're going to need to educate them, I think. And so take this opportunity, and I think I heard from CEA that they would be happy to bring some of Martin's ideas in front of them. And I think that people just communicating with their supervisors saying, look, this is what we're thinking about. We want to have an economy that really works for us and that is efficient, essentially. And one of the things that I was thinking about was, so, this, Martin, you explain this idea of upstream and downstream job creation, and mining looks pretty mediocre in terms of providing downstream jobs. So I'm curious, what are some of the possible industries that would be stronger options for the county and provide jobs that actually would benefit our area?
So I'll go back and just show them, and people can stare at them for a minute. Mm-hmm. And what you'll see is per $1 million of final product, the left column shows the number of direct jobs. And then the right column is indirect jobs. And you can see which ones are stronger. Maybe I'll go back to the previous one. Yeah, here's the one that shows these ones in green. So utilities, manufacturing, information, real estate and rental leasing. This is a pain point for our community. And that's not creating any new greenhouse gases. Manufacturing is making stuff, taking parts of the earth and processing into something to sell. Rental leasing and real estate, how many of you know how tight of a crunch it is now? And look at that job multiplier. Professional, scientific, technical, management of companies, arts, entertainment, and recreation. It gives you about the same indirect, but it gives you way more induced downstream jobs. And so what I would suggest is, again, going to, the Rise Gold website, and all you have to do is just go to any of their jobs related links or press releases, and they all eventually lead to this Economic Policy Institute page. It's a very simple page. It's just these two tables. Mm-hmm. And you take your pick, which one of those, and I would suggest that a healthy mix is what's best for our job diet for the community, is we don't want to be dependent on any one thing. And we're already pretty diverse. So I say, our future in growing jobs is really going to be taken care of by our needs. We don't need to throw up our hands and say somebody out of town's got to do it for us.
Right.
So,
thank you.
Yeah, and the
So-
county shows that we're going to add about 3,000 or 1,000 jobs a year already based on business as usual growth. But, you know, the future's uncertain.
Okay, so we're getting to the hour, close to our time to end, and I want to turn it over to, are we going to do a quick poll and then turn it over to you, Tracy? What's the next thing? Let's do that. Let's do a couple polls, and then Tracy will tell us a little bit about how people can get involved. So let's start with this. What do you think? So the key determinants the Board of Supervisors should use when considering a commercial, industrial, or residential area are what? It's multiple choice. Choose 3. Let us know what you think. And Martin, we hear that you're running low on battery power.
Yes.
So if we lose you, we'll understand why. Just thank you for doing the presentation. And let's see if we have more questions here in the
I don't know if you want to transfer the hosting to someone else in case my laptop does poop out so the whole meeting doesn't go away.
Okay.
But one comment about the permit process that the county is engaged in versus do they need to make an economic study? And what I'd like to remind people is it is a permit process. And so think about when you construct something at your home, you add a deck, you add a swimming pool. It's generally a very technical process. It's designed to make sure that you're not doing anything dangerous, but they don't make you say, hey, can you pay for that swimming pool? Can you pay for this remodel? And so think of it that way, that it really is a permit process that can be very factual, and it is up to us to pull those appropriate emotional strings to make them realize, hey, this is a song and dance on the jobs. I know it's romantic because it's a gold mine, but I promise you that if you hid all of these industries under a black box and you presented them in numbers to the Board of Supervisors and said, which of these do you want? None of them would pick mining. It would be the bottom of the barrel if it was a black box just based on jobs numbers. But because it's mining, it's this emotional heartstring. So it's up to us, just like you're saying, to deliver this financial info to counter their romantic notion that really isn't borne out by the data.
I wonder if Ralph might want to comment on the timing of the next, what's going on here in terms of the mine, in terms of the process, because people are asking, can't we get something to the Board of Supervisors, et cetera?
Yeah, I'd be happy to comment on that. Currently, the draft environmental impact report for the mine itself has not been published, and they're still working on it. Every time we ask, they say it'll be another month or 2. So we're looking at almost a year from the first estimate. That's not surprising. It's a very complex project. So at any point along the way now, people can always send in comments. Once the draft EIR comes out, the environmental impact report, that's when it's really important to see what they actually ended up with, you know, in terms of addressing so many of the comments from before and the impacts. As far as the Centennial cleanup goes, it's further along. The mitigated negative declaration will, once the comment period is over on September 23rd, they will take all the comments. They'll make modifications to that as they feel appropriate. And then it does not go before a public hearing. It just goes to the director of the DTSC. So that could happen quite a bit more quickly. We're hoping to have some influence on that to make that cleanup a better result, regardless of what the mine ends up doing. And I can't give you an exact time on that, but it'd probably be a couple months.
I'm trying to go through all the question and answers just to make sure I've got everything covered. And I see one comment from Robert, and he says, Grass Valley has not been successful in generating good paying jobs. He says, although I do not support the mine, we do need to better suggest what other jobs could be created. I totally agree. I was just thinking, one thing that occurred to me when I asked the question, what are these jobs? One thing that occurred to me is forest management. We need foresters. We need people to go in and create healthy forests so we can mitigate wildfire and create, better watersheds that are more resilient, that store more water for us, so that we can work on these climate issues that are absolutely, front and center in what we need to deal with. And I think that our county is one of the areas that could easily create lots of jobs that way. It's something that the Sierra Fund thinks about and is trying to work on with other entities. And but there's really, it's just our imaginations. Really, we can, as a county, can create good jobs. And I think that Robert is right. I think the county needs to help incentivize that, but I think it's very possible. So, Tracy, do you want to give us a final pitch about how we can get involved if we're not already?
I'd love to.
Great.
Great.
And
Thank you.
one quick comment, if I could make, this is Martin. Last thing about the jobs is just look at the energy action plan, and it's going to need a lot of local people to enact the renewable energy, the storage, the energy efficiency, and water efficiency. So it's not going to be elves that's going to make that reduction in usage. And I think there's a heap of jobs that need to be pushed behind that energy action plan to actually make it work. So I'd ask people to really support the community stepping up behind the EAP and creating the jobs to actually make that happen. A lot of jobs there in the EAP waiting to happen.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Tracy Sheehan. If we haven't met yet, I can't wait to meet you. It's tough to do these Zoom meetings, but this is our best way to organize right now. So a lot of times what we hear is, what can I really do? So I'm going to review those in 2 short slides. It's only going to take 3 minutes. You listen to a webinar like this and you want to translate all of that concern into some real action. Well, we have real concrete action for you to take. So a few things. First, people ask, well, who is the final decision maker? Obviously, it's the Board of Supervisors. There's 5 supervisors, so we're looking at a majority, 3 of the 5. So your supervisor needs to hear from you. If you have not made a comment or written a letter, I really encourage you to do that. All the information you need to do that is on our website. It's super easy. And there's actually also an action kit that you can look at. So doing the letter is the first thing you can do, but there are many other things. So I encourage you, go look at our action kit. I'm going to go to the volunteers next, but let's skip to the day of action. Many of you signed up to help table and get petition signatures signed to the board. Thank you so much. That was a great day of action. We had over 100 people sign up to do that. And so we encourage you to do that again. Our next day of action, this time we're going to hit the neighborhoods and we're going to knock on doors and inform people, especially in the area of the mineral rights zone, of what's happening. So if you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get more information on that, on what we're going to be doing. And we think that will be early October. So those are 2 things right now to think about. Can you go to the next slide, please? I think Christy has control of the slides. So really, right up on top, right away, write down my email address here. Listen, we have done great in the last year. We have a lot of people, our mailing list is expanding. One thing that Rise Gold does not have that we have is the grassroots reach, the grassroots support. We've heard a lot of frustration from folks who have seen postcard and glossy mailers, fake opinion surveys. And what I want to impress on folks is that Rise Gold is doing that because they are working to try to get out to the community. Of course they are. But what they don't have is the grassroots support we have now. And so it's up to you. For us to take this campaign to the next level, we really need to build our campaign infrastructure. So once you've made the comments, take a look at this list. This is a few things that we need to have happen right now. Are you interested in doing something like this? Send me an email. We're looking to do business outreach because we believe that businesses are going to be really important messengers to the Board of Supervisors. Of course, we just mentioned the neighborhood outreach, getting out to neighborhoods and speaking to your neighbors about this. We have signs throughout town. We need people to sign those up. Social media. We'd love to have a filmmaker if you're here tonight. But there are many other things to do, from making presentations to community groups and simply calling those groups. Actually, Nancy Jacobson, who's on tonight, I noticed. Hi, Nancy. She's been working to get outreach to the community groups to set up meetings. So thank you, Nancy. But you could help her do that as well. We also need data entry. We need people to help with the webinar. So send me an email. If any of these things look of interest to you, please email me, because we would love to have you. And again, this helps us create a larger team and more grassroots power. So thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Okay, we are at the 7:30 hour. So again, I just want to say thank you to everybody who came. Thank you very much, Martin and Ralph, for doing these presentations. Thank you to really all of you who help this effort. It takes a community, and we are one. And it is really exciting to see how much support CEA and the MineWatch campaign is receiving to close down the mine. Ralph, do you want to say something?
Yeah. First, thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate it. But I just want to say that we appreciate donations. We need funding for legal, for web production, for all these things. They all cost money, and that's the grease that keeps the wheels moving. So please check out on our website. There's a place to donate. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, we do. This is things cost money, so please help us that way too. And with that, I think we're done. So good night. Thank you again. Our next presentation will be, do we know when, Tracy?
The 4th Thursday of September, which I don't know off the top of my head, but just remember 4th Thursday.
4th Thursday, and we will be sending out an announcement about that. Okay, with that, good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.